Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's event. My name is Nathan Yowell. I am the Executive Director of Progressive Britain. It's the host organisation for this event. I'll just take a minute to tell you more about this if you haven't come across this before. So Progressive Britain was launched in May 2021 as the coming together of two organisations you may well have known. Progress, which was the movement for progressives in the Labour Party, and Policy Network, which was very much known to those of you on the continent as a think tank and platform for progressive thinking about global issues and bringing together progressives and social democrats from different countries to tackle some of those questions and decisions. We've taken the decision this year. Obviously, 2019 was a terrible year for Labour. 2020 was a really important year with the election of Keir Starmer and trying to win the confidence of the people back, that actually we needed to change as well. So that's why this year we've come together as a new platform for critical thinking, for policy making, and for political education. And actually for most of this year, we've been doing a lot of developmental work, thinking about how we're going to work. And actually, we're ready to start launching in the next couple of months a work program for 2022 that will be, like I said, we'll be publishing next week. But crucially, one of the most important aspects of that work program is going to be a series of events with colleagues and institutions in America and in Europe doing some comparative work about politics and progressive parties across the globe. So actually, there is no better event to kickstart that piece of work, and obviously on no better day to host it, as obviously in the last 2 hours we've had formal acknowledgement that the coalition agreement has been signed. So on that note, I'm going to hand you over to Michelle Auger, who is here from the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, they're one of the main German think tanks for the SPD, who's going to say a couple of words, then hand over to Anneliese Dodds, who many of you know is the MP for Oxford East, chair of the Labour Party and Shadow Secretary of State for Equalities, who's then going to have a discussion with Jens Zimmermann, SPD member of the Bundestag, and one of the key negotiators for today's coalition agreement. Last item from me, we have already started recording. So just so you're aware, this is being recording and it will be saved to posterity on the Progressive Britain website. I think that's all for me for the time being. So Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Nathan. To a rather weak internet connection, I should keep it really short and start with a lot of thank yous. Thank you to our co-hosts here tonight. Thank you, Anneliese, to be with us here. Thank you, Jens. You made it all the way over the channel to be with us and still have to be in a Zoom meeting. Sorry about that. And last but not least, thank you, Olaf Scholz, for being so timely to finish with the negotiations just before our end. Thanks a lot. And I think we should not waste much time, and with no further ado, I should move over to Anneliese. Anneliese, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Michelle, and it's such a pleasure to be part of this event. Obviously, as we've just heard, with the support of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, also of Progressive Britain and of the Aston Centre for Europe as well. And just as has been mentioned, we couldn't be having these discussions at a better time. I also think we couldn't be having these discussions with a better person, actually, because Jens, who's joined us fresh from the Bundestag actually in London, although you wouldn't know it because this is virtual, of course, was heavily involved in the coalition negotiations, both in 2017 and then also, of course, this time around, very, very important part, I would say, of British-German relations as well, where he, of course, is engaged in the parliamentary friendship group between Germany and Britain. At a policy level, Jens has also worked a huge amount on a variety of international issues, including illicit finance, sadly, increasingly important work there, money laundering and terrorist financing. And he, of course, is someone who is very, very locally and regionally rooted as well, with all the work that he does for Hesse. So it's really, really good to have you with us tonight, Jens, and I'm sure that you'll want to provide us with your reflections on what's happened in the last couple of hours. But one of the things that is asked of me so often is, well, you know, how on earth did the SPD pull off that amazing election victory? I think many of us couldn't quite dare to believe that it was possible that Scholz would indeed win, and yet he did. And of course, that was coming from a position quite far behind in the polls at some points, I believe 16 points behind, to then smash through and of course come to be Chancellor. And I wondered for your thoughts on, you know, what the winning formula was. Jens, from your point of view, how did the SPD manage to win this time with Scholz, and what lessons are there for Labour from that? And just before I pass on to you, Jens, maybe if I could just ask, please, anyone who would like to ask some questions later on in the proceedings, if you could put your questions into the Q&A, and we will then deal with those after the discussion between myself and Jens is concluded. But yes, just those first thoughts about what you did in the party in order to win those elections would be terrific to start us off with, please.
Sure, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's always great coming to the UK, coming to London, and especially these days, this is really amazing because everybody's happy seeing somebody from abroad, and it's the same in the Bundestag as well. We are happy because meeting in person is something very important. Yeah, I put in my virtual background Olaf Scholz. If you don't know him, that's the man of the day, of the hour, maybe of the year in Germany. And this guy over here was the conservative frontrunner, Armin Laschet. And this was taken, this is a piece from our only tabloid we are having in Germany, lucky us, the Bild. And it was when the Social Democrats overtook the conservatives in the polls. And how on earth did this happen? I would love now coming with that winning strategy, and but I don't buy these stories where you put all the pieces together after you won and declare something to a strategy, because there's also a certain element of luck inside. But, and I've told that story for the last 2 days many times, but I think it puts it into a nutshell. Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So the thing is, what we did as SPD, we had a perfectly organized and prepared campaign. And in addition to that, we learned our lessons from our defeat in 2017. And I think, I mean, this is not rocket science, but Lars Klingbeil, our Secretary General, he asked for a rigorous report, what went wrong in 2017. So we hired 4 experts who talked to every staff member of the 2017 campaign in 2017, right after the election, and they filed an 80-page report. And a lot of the findings from this report were transferred into our 2021 campaign. And first, we decided to declare our Spitzenkandidat, our frontrunner, very early. So Olaf Scholz was nominated 12 months before the election. And political common sense in Germany would suggest that you don't do that, because it gives your opponents a lot of time to throw rubbish on your frontrunner. But it helped us a lot because we were able to build the campaign and the manifesto around our most prominent person. And during the last 3 general elections, it was the other way around. We had our front runner, and somehow it needed to be pushed into our manifesto, and it didn't really fit. So this was definitely one important aspect of preparation. And in addition to that, we really did a proper campaign. So the craftsmanship behind the ad campaign, the advertising, and all these questions, it was simply done very professionally and on point. So this helped a lot, especially, and this is where opportunity comes in, the other parties, especially the Greens and the Conservatives, they failed. They failed with their nominational process of their frontrunners, and they failed badly with their campaigns. So it really, they did mistakes on a very basic level. For example, the posters of the Greens, you weren't able to read anything on them because when we were standing in front of them, they looked very nice and it was great design work. But when you were driving by that poster in your car, you weren't able to read anything. And in Germany, we are mad about posters. So if you come during an election to Germany, on every street light, you see these posters with our faces on. And so they play an important role. And we were able to be very good with all these aspects of a campaign, which you can plan. So I think this was very, very important. And in addition to that, I think we did the right analysis of what kind of election 2021 would be in Germany, because simply after 16 years, Angela Merkel was not running again. And as simple and as easy as it sounds, this was a dramatic change to the last 3 or 4 general elections. And even though it seemed a little bit, I don't know, crazy, strange, Olaf Scholz was positioned as some kind of male version of Angela Merkel. And even though this is probably not the most popular idea and it is nothing which plays to your progressive heart, but on the other side, many people in Germany thought that Angela Merkel was a great chancellor, and offering the electorate something they like is maybe a good idea. And in addition to that, and I finish on that, I mean, you know, we as progressives, as social democrats, we never lack of policy papers. So we have tons of it. But these guys here in the Conservative Party, for 16 years, their only policy was Angela Merkel and staying in power. And once Angela Merkel was erased from the equation, it somehow became simply zero because there was nothing left. They had a weak candidate who did many mistakes during the campaign and ended up in a downward spiral. And they weren't able to counter this with policy, with issues, with really something they want to change in Germany. And I think that helped us a lot because we had a trustworthy candidate who was really the natural successor of Angela Merkel. And we had great policy putting stuff like minimum wage of 12 euros in the front of the campaign. And all of that came together in the end. Nevertheless, and this ends my thought that this is not the perfect winning strategy we all saw through in 12 months ago. We ended up with 25% of the vote. And so in 1998, for example, we ended up with like 38% of the vote. So it's important to keep that in mind, that 25% is still, historically speaking, a rather weak result, even though we are having the Greens, the far left, and so on and so on. But still, I mean, we ended up being the largest parliamentary party, which is obviously a great thing.
Absolutely, and thank you ever so much for that insight. That's incredibly helpful, I think, for all of us, certainly from the UK Labour side to hear. And if you don't mind, Jens, I suppose a couple of questions coming out of that I'd be interested in answers to. First of all, one thing that was very striking, I think, for outsiders looking in was the alternative responses of Scholz compared with Laschet to the appalling floods that took place in Germany. And it was kind of presented in the British media that was covering it. And of course, we don't have a huge amount of coverage of necessarily what takes place in Germany, but as if this kind of revealed different personalities, with kind of Laschet being, very offhand, not engaged, not empathetic and serious, and Scholz being much more serious. So it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts about the role of personality there. And just one other point, of course, we talk a lot in UK Labour about the relative importance of digital campaigning. I have seen all of the posters. In the UK, it all depends on the bylaws whether we're allowed to put them up in different places or not. We've had some by-elections where there's been lots of them, others where we haven't, but certainly nothing like in Germany at all. Was there a digital strategy for this campaign? And if so, how was that weighted against the display of posters and so forth?
Right. So first on personality, the SPD in Germany, we have a history of chancellors of having the right feeling for the things to do in times of crises. So this dates back to Helmut Schmidt. Helmut Schmidt was really a chancellor who was amazing in handling crises. And he's also from Hamburg, like Olaf Scholz. And he became very famous when he was managing the largest flood ever we had in Germany. And Helmut Schmidt then was calling in the army, even though this is forbidden by constitutional law in Germany, but he simply didn't care, and he was hands-on and managing the crises and saving lives. And in 2002, actually, there was another flood in eastern Germany, and in 2002, Gerhard Schröder was on the way of losing the general election, and then this flood happened, and he was walking with his boots during the flood regions, and was showing support and showing that he is in charge, and he was able to change direction of the campaign and win. And now I think these days, with social media, and this is, I think, a very good connection, about the power of pictures. And I think Olaf Scholz did quite well, because he knew this is a huge opportunity to him. When it happened, Angela Merkel was on holidays, so he was as vice chancellor, he was in charge. So he appeared instantly in the flood region. He wasn't able to do a lot, and help was organized, but he showed up there, and he showed the right balance of presence, of interest, but not perceived as somebody who was using this as a photo op. Armin Laschet, he is the prime minister. He was the prime minister of North Rhine-Westphalia, where one of the two spots of that flooding happened. And I would say, he's a decent man, and he's a good politician. And I think he managed the flood from the state level well. But he was, I don't know, he didn't have the right feeling for the pictures. And one of the turning points in this election was when German federal president Frank-Walter Steinmeier, also social democrat, when he appeared in the flood region and he gave a very good speech assuring the support of whole Germany to the victims. Armin Laschet was standing right, like 10 meters behind him, right in the focus of the cameras, and was giggling. So you have the federal, I mean, it's like, imagine Her Majesty the Queen giving a speech in a flood area, and Boris Johnson, okay, maybe not a good example, giggling in the background, okay, could happen. No, but you know what I mean. So this was one of the turning points. It definitely wasn't the cause for the defeat, but the power of these pictures. And to be completely honest, we were good in doing negative campaigning in situations like this. I mean, and let me be blunt, this is something where we need to be better as progressives, because this is something we don't want to do. We don't want to wander around the internet and blaming the political opponents, but they are doing this all the time. They are spending money on dark ads. They do whatever they can to throw mud at us. And what we did is we at least used situations like this to share these pictures, to share these messages, because they are great communicational opportunities. I mean, this was not the bulk of our activities, but what we did is we were able for the first time to create really a group of online activists, because somehow in Germany, I mean, we have 400,000 members, and people think if they are going knocking on doors, if they are distributing leaflets, they think they are actively contributing to the campaign. But when they are online on social media and clicking, they don't perceive something like that as really actively campaigning. But we were able to achieve this for the very first time. We used Telegram. So we had a Telegram channel for our activists, and we managed to assemble a couple of thousand activists there. And our social media team was constantly or regularly providing exclusive information through this channel. So if you were an activist and you were in this Telegram channel, you got interesting information, you got exclusive information, so you could use this information and share it on Twitter, for example. So and our social media, our manager, our head of operations, she was amazed, because when we had the nomination of Olaf Scholz at our party conference, they produced a glossy TV ad, but at first it was only distributed through the Telegram channel, and she didn't need to do anything. It spread across the internet because everybody in that group was so happy having exclusively that content. So that helped a lot. And also during TV debates, this was a constant factor, and I think it played an important role. And of course, due to COVID, we experimented a lot with Zoom conferences like these, but still, it is a difficult business. It is a difficult business, but it helped. Olaf Scholz made a lot of online appearances in all different constituencies, because that helped a lot. I mean, I had an online event with Olaf, and I was promoting it in my constituency. I handed out 300 posters. I had ads in my local newspaper and so on, because it seemed like the Spitzenkandidat is coming to my constituency. So that helped a lot, because you always want to shine a little bit with your with your front runner, and that worked out because he was able to attend in many constituencies without traveling through the whole country.
Fascinating stuff, and so much of relevance to us, and very interesting also to hear about how negative campaigning was used. And I think so much of what you said is really ringing home in the UK. I mean, I would say, of course, I think those of us who are involved in Labour politics on the call are very well aware of a situation where we've had a leader of the Conservative Party who has behaved often in a very kind of disrespectful way, has got away with it for a long time, but perhaps some of that may be catching up with him now, it seems, over the last few days and weeks. But anyway, so interesting what you said. Maybe to move in now to some of the details of the coalition negotiations, because I know lots of people on the call will be really interested in those, and we just had that news just a couple of hours ago, I think it was, that the negotiations have been successful. There is a plan, one which seems to have a strong focus on the drive to net zero, and some really interesting points within it around decarbonisation, future of vehicles and this kind of thing. I wonder, maybe from your point of view, I know that you were particularly working on areas to do with infrastructure and digital and so forth, what your take is on that deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think, 174 pages long. I mean, this is like an SPD. Our party manifesto only had 68 pages, so it easily fits into the coalition agreement. But I mean, I think we try to frame this new coalition as a coalition of modernization, because I think modernization and progress, and I think this is necessary, because obviously after 16 years with the conservative chancellor, there is a lot to be done, because conservatism is not about change and progress, it's about preservation, and up to a certain degree, this is what happened, and also what many people in Germany enjoyed with Angela Merkel, because they knew she won't change too much, and but I think this gives us now a lot of opportunity, because so we will also focus on the modernization of society, and so one of the probably most debated aspects is the legalization of cannabis. This is a big step, but is something which is debated for a very long time. And I think it shows some progress, because as many of us know, the policies around drug abuse, they failed more or less all around the world. So getting a new approach there is at least progressive. And as you mentioned, of course, the question how, and this is really one of the brilliant things, bringing together Social Democrats, Greens, and Liberals, the question, how can we, it's not about if, it's how can we reach net zero, how can we fight climate change on a basis where not the average people and the low income people, our people, that they pay the bill at the end of the day for reaching this. Because as we all know, if you simply let the market forces regulate this, I mean, if I need to pay as a member of parliament £2.50 for petrol, this is one thing. But if you're living outside the big cities and you need to go to your work every day, this is a huge thing. And so we always campaign that the burden need to be fairly shared. And I think this is one of the big missions we are having in that coalition. But I think we will be able to achieve this. And maybe one of the important aspects there is, I mean, Germany is a land of bureaucracy. I mean, we love our bureaucracy, even though everybody's complaining about it. But for example, building a new windmill takes for ages because there's so much bureaucracy. And this is also interesting because we, on the progressive left, we promoted for a very long time direct democracy and participation. And what we are seeing in Germany is that participation is used to stop projects, not because people really want to have a proper debate, but these are the NIMBYs in our country, and they're using the frame of participation, simply stopping and slowing down infrastructure projects, new landlines, new windmills. And what we are trying to do is simply speeding up all these projects, because if we want to really get carbon neutral, we need to build much more renewables, because as you know, we nearly completely phased out nuclear, and we are now trying to speed up the phasing out of coal. But at the end of the day, the energy needs to come from somewhere. And I mean, we are having not the geographic privilege of being surrounded by the ocean, where you can build a perfectly huge wind farms. We simply don't have that in Germany. So we need to be a little bit more creative there. And also looking into my field, into digital, it's also about speed. So speed for your internet connection, obviously. So I'm glad seeing that even in London, you have sometimes problems, at least in the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung office. But it's still, infrastructure is a huge topic. But I think we will be able to increase speed there. But what's also, I think, a fascinating thing is we are trying to put citizens' rights in the digital sphere much more in the focus. And this is also, I think, in a German-British context, very interesting. We are trying to balance out the competencies of the security services compared to the individual's rights, because the same happened in the UK over the last decade. Our security services, the police, they got more and more possibilities of spying on citizens. Of course, this is necessary to prevent terrorism, for example, but we have the feeling the balance is not right anymore. So what we will do is we will have a complete overhaul of our security legislation in the digital world. So first of all, we will have a commission evaluating about the status quo, because what's usually happening is you are adding one bill, one law after another, and nobody is looking at the big picture. And we will exactly do that. We will have a view on the big picture and then review the whole legislation there. And I think this is a great thing. This is really progressive, because I think it's crucial for us, especially in the UK, in Europe, to have citizens' rights. They are really important, because if we are not good fighting for these rights, then you easily can move to China or to Russia, or then it doesn't matter if you're living in Europe.
Absolutely, and thank you ever so much for that. So much food for thought in what you said, and I think many of us are looking very really at that credible plan towards net zero that was set out by the SPD, and how that seemed to really garner support across the board. But actually, just my last question, I want to dig into that a little bit more around the nature of the SPD's electoral coalition at the time of the last election. Obviously, over time, there's been continued support, as I understand it, for the SPD amongst older voters. Changing developments in the East, really interesting what happened with obviously with Scholz in the East and kind of building back up the support there. But then with young people, you know, still pretty stubborn levels of support for the Green Party, and just wondered whether you feel now with the Chancellorship, whether there's a chance to break through that and start to draw those younger voters, you know, en masse back towards the SPD?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is definitely one of the aspects when I said earlier the victory is not a victory in red and everything is perfect. What we were able to achieve is, I think that we, up to a certain degree, we went back to our bread and butter business. So we were focusing on minimum wage, pensions, the healthcare. These are really important things, and I think it was absolutely right to focus on these things, because people in Germany think the social democracy has its competencies in these fields, and I think it's always important in a campaign. You have two options. You can try to create a lot of buzz for a topic, so making a topic big in the public debate, and you can try to create more competency and better pollings on certain issues. And I think it is important that we were creating the buzz around these topics where the SPD is perceived as being very competent and the number one. Because the problem is, and I've seen that at my local level, if we as social democrats create a lot of buzz around climate change, something happening is that the Greens will get more votes, because they are perceived as the most competent party in questions of climate change. So this is important, I think, as one lesson learned. You need to make you need to put the attention to the fields where you are the leading party. And nevertheless, this led to a good amount of votes among 60 plus generation. We were able to regain support in Eastern Germany, but we weren't able to get the number of votes from first time and young voters that we would love to see. And I mean, for us from center left, it makes us very sad if the young generation is not following us, because we try to create a better society, especially for them. I think it's a little bit tricky to compare this situation from Germany with the UK, because I mean, we have a Green Party which is very strong. We have a far left party which is also in the Bundestag. So the spectrum is a little bit more separated in Germany, but building a coalition in the UK and in other countries between older people who care about the society and younger is possible. And as I mentioned earlier, if we are able to connect these big questions, and also we always need to explain why it needs a labor movement. And I think times of change and transformation should be the era of the labor movement, because it was during the Industrial Revolution, it needed a labor movement to fight for workers' rights. And now coming into the digital revolution, where jobs will be lost, where skills need to change, and where we have this huge task of fight against climate change, this is the time where it needs the labor movement to fight for citizens' rights, to fight for our people's rights, and to make sure that not the rich will be better off in the end. And I think this is really should be one of our key topics, and I think we were able to achieve this up to a certain degree. And I think the good news is, and this should also give some confidence to the Labour Party and to other parties around Europe. The change in Germany happened quite fast. So thinking back only 2 years, nobody imagined we would now have the next social democratic chancellor in Germany. It seemed completely ridiculous only thinking about something like that, and now we made it possible. And one of the key factors was that after a very long time of internal turbulences and internal fights and arguments, we were able to create unity inside our party. And I definitely would argue that unity inside the party is key to really focus on fighting our political opponents and presenting to the electorate an attractive alternative.
Well, thanks very much indeed. And in fact, some of what you've just said there has been very relevant to some of the questions that have been posed, and it's an absolute delight to move on to them. Lots of interesting questions that people have been posting in the Q&A. Maybe if I could kick off with one from a brilliant Labour parliamentary colleague, Ben Bradshaw, who's got a keen interest in Germany, and he posed, I think, quite an interesting question related to what you said before, Jens. Was there a kind of conscious debate around the appropriate balance between change and continuity, and how to present Scholz and the SPD in particular, and how did you kind of navigate that? I think it'd be interesting for us to hear from you on that subject.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure if I'm able to completely answer it, because I wasn't involved in all these decisions. But I mean, what's important is, I mean, we had a leadership contest in the SPD in 2019. Olaf Scholz was running to become leader of the Social Democratic Party, and he lost. He lost in that leadership contest against a more left-wing team with Saskia Esken and Norbert Walter-Borjans. And 1 year later, they were the ones asking Olaf Scholz to run as our candidate. So, I mean, this is the secret behind the unity. So they, even though they were fighting very hard in that leadership contest, they were able to unite and to work together, and this helped a lot. And the question about how to position Olaf Scholz, I'm not sure if we were really able to do that artificially. I think, I mean, I don't know if you, obviously, you know, The West Wing, and there is that episode when they're debating about the presidential campaign, and when the wife of Josiah Bartlett is cutting the tie before the presidential debate, and the theme then was "Let Bartlett be Bartlett," and our theme at some point was "Let Scholz be Scholz." So that's the point I want to make. I don't think you should be, because you can over consult candidates. And what happened to our good friend Martin Schulz, who's now the president of Friedrich Ebert Foundation, by the way, and is still he's a great guy, because after this defeat he was really, I mean, many former candidates, they don't behave very nicely after they lost, but Martin is a great guy, and now is investing so much in international cooperation. But he was over consulted. He came from Brussels. Nobody knew him really well in Berlin, but people liked him. So we went through the roof in 2017. Suddenly we were polling over 30%, but this went down very fast. And one of the results of our report is, or was, that he was over-consulted. Suddenly, when he simply was Martin Schulz, the former mayor from a small town, Würselen, people liked him. And suddenly all these consultants came in and say, you shouldn't say that. You should be a little bit more there. It all went down. And I think what Olaf Scholz did, he simply was Olaf Scholz. So he is that calm person. He is, he's the accountant-like person, but he never seemed artificial. It always was him, and I think that that maybe was the important thing. Let that person be that person, because otherwise people simply won't buy it. And I mean, even though Boris Johnson seems to be like a clown, but that's him. I think that's really him, and that is what people appreciate. Yeah. Even though it's very difficult, especially from a German perspective, to understand, but that's my analysis.
Absolutely, and I think that authenticity is so important. And actually, I think a lot of us in Labour feel that, Keir Starmer's seriousness, commitment, that contrast with Johnson is very powerful. And certainly when we've been having discussions around corruption, sadly, because of the Conservatives' approach, particularly to contracting during COVID, it's been easy for us really to show that contrast, and something we need to keep hammering home, I think. Just related to one point that you made, and it's picked up in the Q&A as well, you talked about unity, and I think there's often debates in parties about whether the focus is on the activists or on the electorates, and what the overlap is, and you said there really was this attempt to bring different groups together, and that seemed to work well. I mean, were there tensions in the other direction? Were there people saying, look, you need to have a bit more of a kind of visible reorientation of the party? It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that subject too.
Definitely, and it wasn't a done deal in the first place that this is working, because obviously that part of the party which voted in the leadership context for the other team, they didn't vote for them for getting Olaf Scholz as the front runner. So, but actually, this is also a success of the broader leadership, I would say. So we have, as I mentioned, our Secretary General, Lars Klingbeil, who organized the campaign. And then we have a very vocal colleague, Kevin Kühnert, who used to be the head of our youth wing. And they teamed up. I don't know if they are really friends, but they found common ground and were working very closely together and talking a lot, and were simply able to manage this. And I think this is also a lesson which could be interesting. So obviously it doesn't need hundreds and thousands of activists from different corners of our parties working together. It helps if key leadership persons, if they are working together, and if they know why they are doing it, because there is a greater cause than our arguments about the purity of socialism. And even though we love these debates, but if you want to win an election, I think this is very, very important. And yeah, that's it.
Absolutely. Just a couple of slightly more specific questions that have come through. One of the participants kind of asking, well, where next for Die Linke? Obviously, following the negotiations, they're not part of that coalition. Where do you anticipate their well, obviously they won't be part of government, but I mean, will that mean that they'll be constantly criticising, you know, Scholz and the SPD? You know, where do you think that's going to end up?
Yeah, I mean, one of the foundations of their sole existence is criticizing the Social Democrats all day long. I mean, this is, and I mean, having achieved a minimum wage of 12 euros, for example, this is devastating for Die Linke, because this is something they were asking for years over years, and now we simply achieved it. They are always criticizing, but never trying to really form a government. And now we are delivering. And I think this is very, very tough times ahead, I would say, for Die Linke, because they ended up with 4.9%. And this is, I think, also very interesting, because we always argue around, where are elections won? Are they won in the center, or are they won at the on the left? And I mean, having Scholz with a clearly centrist candidate, you would expect Die Linke going through the roof, but the opposite happened. They went down completely, mainly because they completely screwed it up. I mean, they don't have unity in their party. The very extremist forces gained more and more power. So you have a combination of COVID deniers, people who love to meet with people from the far right, stuff like that, people traveling to Syria, meeting Assad, stuff like that. And so I would say it's no wonder that this seems not very attractive, even to people willing to support the far left. After they lost nearly half of their parliamentary party, the MPs being left are mainly this kind of people. So this is going to be tough 4 years. Nevertheless, in Eastern Germany, they still have some regional power. They have one prime minister in the state of Thuringia, but this guy is simply a social democrat in the wrong party. And this is, by the way, why it's working there.
That's really helpful for us to know from looking in from outside. Just trying to bring a couple of questions together. Some questions about what does all of this mean for foreign policy, particularly in relation to those nations currently within the EU 27 that are, you know, arguably going strongly against them, or at least the leaders are going strongly against democratic norms. Think about the case of Hungary, for example, and now, of course, with the Greens holding the foreign secretary position. And also a question asking about what the position is likely to be on issues like LGBT plus rights coming from the new coalition agreement.
Yeah, I mean, on foreign policy, first of all, I would say Germany is about continuity in foreign policy. I mean, even though German foreign policy is very often not so easy to understand from a broad position, because it's a little bit special. But nevertheless, within the European Union, of course, it will be one of the key policies to maintain the integrity of the European Union. We will stay strong about citizens' rights in Hungary and Poland, and I think we will have a lot of debates there, but I don't see any change. So this is definitely about continuity, and I think also we will see we will be a little bit more vocal about human rights in China, for example, about the role of Russia, stuff like that. But nevertheless, German foreign policy is always seeking multilateralism. We feel most comfortable working together with our allies, and I think I would love seeing a bigger role for the E3 format. Maybe this is really an opportunity. Yeah. So, and on LGBTQ rights, I think I mean we achieved a lot over, even in a coalition with the Conservatives. But nevertheless, we will speed up all these processes. We want to ban discrimination because of your sexual identity, for example. So this is written down in the coalition agreement, and from what I'm hearing from that community, there is a lot of hope and applause. And we also know that we need to deliver there, because there is a lot of hope for into that coalition. In addition to that, not precisely part of that question, but equally important, we have a very old-fashioned legislation around abortion, which is in practice working quite well, but legally speaking, abortion in Germany is still illegal. And this is, in the year 2021, having a less modern abortion law than Ireland is not really a good thing. So we will modernize at least some parts of it, because we had, in the last years, we had a debate because one doctor was sued for advertising. She wrote on her homepage that she is doing abortions, and this is forbidden under German law, and we will get rid of that specific paragraph in that law. So, but I think all these things, I mean, we had huge debates about this issue, and now the coalition will simply get rid of it. And I think there are many of these small and big victories.
Absolutely. Well, on that positive, very positive note, last very positive and optimistic question for us to finish off for the last couple of minutes. I'm sure, I mean, you won't have been seeing all of the questions because we've worked you very hard, Jens, and you've been giving us your thoughts continuously for almost an hour, so you won't have seen the support really, and the warmth that there is obviously from UK Labour towards the SPD. And a question there about, well, what more can we do to work together? You know, how can we both improve UK-German relations, but particularly the relations between our two parties, in your point of view?
I think, first of all, it's important that we have think tanks and foundations like the Friedrich Ebert Foundation and Progressive Britain. This is important because we need to have a broad foundation, not only between MPs, but also between the activists in our parties and movements. But I think it's crucial that we also try to work on certain issues. I mean, because our two countries are facing the same problems. And I think there is a very, very good tradition in common ideas and common projects between the SPD and Labour. And maybe, I mean, we are among friends, you know, the Schröder-Blair paper was one of these projects, and obviously many want to forget about that, but still it is not it is a great legacy that two social democratic prime ministers joined forces and thought about the future of our societies. And it's easy now 25 years later complaining about the bits and pieces where they were wrong. But I would love seeing something like that between our parties, and fields like the fight against climate change, digitization. They are perfect for common answers, because this is something we are not able to find solutions on our own.
Absolutely, and of course it's only the Social Democrats who can have answers to those big questions and combine that environmental justice with social justice. So more reason to work together now than ever. I'm sure we could have kept this discussion going actually for many, many hours. And it's been just terrific to have you with us, Jens. Thank you ever so much. Really, really kind of you to give up so much time. Thank you to everyone who's been on this call, for all of your comments, all of the Q&A. I couldn't get everything in, but I did my best. Thank you very, very much, everyone. And of course, a big, big thanks to the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, also to Progressive Britain, and to the Aston Centre for Europe as well. Have a wonderful evening, everybody, filled with the spirit of that German-British social democratic cooperation. Thanks very much, everyone. Good night now.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.